session today. I never know which one to go for first, so I decided let's start with the first one I wrote down, and lucky for me, that's actually the one that I liked. And what is that book? It is Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. I feel like this one will be appealing to anybody who's ever watched One Tree Hill or now like Lifetime and Hallmark movies, because she has since transitioned into those. And given what happened in this book, I'm so glad that she is working. I had read I'm Glad My Mother Is Dead by Jeanette McCurdy, and I did not like it. First off, we know I always listen to audiobooks due to time constraints. Considering she's an actress, she did a terrible job narrating. She was so monotoned, but we're not going to get into that because that's a whole other review. This one, I was so pleasantly surprised because not only did Jeanette McCurdy do a really poor job narrating, but I thought her book lacked emotion. This one, chock full of emotion. While I was reading I'm Glad My Mother's Dead, my emotion was boredom and then just frustration due to boredom. This one, there was anger, there was sorrow, there was pity. It was such a good book. And it was really eye-opening because if you don't know, the gist of this book revolves around Lenz or Joy. So growing up with One Tree Hill, we did not have social media. And my name is Bethany. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's an actress named Bethany. So I just always refer to her as Bethany or Bethany Joy Lenz. But apparently she likes to go by Joy. So that's that. But she was in a cult. Going through this book, and especially at the end when she finally comes to terms with what she's been involved in and the conversations she has with people in the aftermath, it was eye-opening to see how people can get sucked into a cult, because we all from the outside can say, how did you not know? I would never get into a situation like that. But a lot of what she said made sense. So what she did not outright say, but I picked up on, whether or not I was supposed to pick up on it or not, is all the people involved in this cult lacked something in their lives. I felt like she lacked stability, and she also lacked that family unity that she craved. They were all in a place where they were easily swayed, and the guy in charge had a silver tongue, and he knew what to say to get people involved. Even though she questioned things, he was always able to say something that made it make sense. So I thought it was a great insight into how cult mentality works, how somebody can be drawn in, how somebody can stay, even though it's not always a comfortable situation and they realize what's happening isn't entirely accurate. And with that said, let's dive deep. It opens with her having a fight with her husband in a hotel suite. In this first scene, this first chapter, we are distinctly aware of a couple things. One, her husband is controlling. He's somewhat violent, and that she has already come to this conclusion that she needs to get out, but she always has a reason why, just one more. And then in this scene, we are seeing her say, actually, this is it. I've already given him my ultimatum if I don't follow through now. So she does. She follows through. She gets out of there. She seeks refuge with some friends. This is when we then jump into the past. We have a recap of her childhood, which is very unstable. Her parents are together, and I was actually a little surprised that her parents ended up divorcing because it seems to have this great love story. And so I was just surprised because when she painted their meeting, I just was like, oh, a love story for the ages. They move around a lot just because her dad gets jobs in various places. Because of that, she doesn't do well in school. She has a hard time making friends to overcome all these things. So she came from a family of thespians, of people involved in the acting community. She gets involved in theater, and she absolutely finds her place in theater. Eventually, her family lands in New Jersey. She still has a really hard time making friends until this one guy named Blue Eyes shows up, and they are best friends. But from the moment she met him, she knew she was going to marry him. There's not a whole lot of reciprocation, it seems like, but it's super overviewy. So we know some of her thoughts in the situations that she presents. But on his side, it's really unclear as to what his feelings are. We just know that these two are best friends. Her acting career starts to take off. Eventually, her parents do get divorced. She stays with her mother, and they do not get along. She has landed a spot on Guiding Light. This then moves her to New York, and she's there for a couple of years, and then at some point she says, I don't want to renew my contract, because she just had so many near misses, and she's like, maybe this is not the place for me. Her dream gig has always been Beauty and the Beast on Broadway, though. But when it came clear that maybe things weren't working out for her career in New York, she said, let me go to California. Well, she already had one friend named Camille move from New York to California. And then she also connects with this woman named Mina. Mina is about 10 years older than her. Joy's first impression of Mina is how stunning she is. But then with that, she also sees the frivolity of Hollywood and how even though Mina is stunning, she's aging out. Even though she's only in her early 30s, she is no longer getting parts because of her age. They end up moving in together. Mina has this massive crush on this guy named Harker. Joy has always grown up religious, and she's kind of in a funk. She doesn't really know what to do with herself. So Mina says, hey, let's go to this Bible study at Harker's house. Harker has a brother named Abe, so Harker is a pretty well-known actor. They are from Idaho. The parents live half in Idaho, half in LA, and Joy loves this group. She feels like she's fitting in, she's finding her place. Even though there's no specific church orientation, she feels like she's getting fed. Well, about 6 months in, she walks in, and this just disturbs me. She walks into their house, and it smells to the high heavens, and she's like, what is cooking? Turns out that some family friends that Harker's parents know from Idaho are staying here for a little bit. The dad, Les, had been a preacher, and apparently he had lost his flock. So he's trying to get back on his feet. Harker's parents offer Les and his family, because he has a wife and 3 children. One is named Quiet Boy, and then the other 2 are just called the Barbarians. Eventually, Harker's parents offer their home to Les and his family while they get back on their feet. But in the meantime, hey, why don't you come with us down to LA and take part in this Bible study that we have been leading? Little by little, Les starts to take over. He comes with credentials, so nobody really says anything. And Joy's kind of like, I wonder if Harker and Abe and his dad have a problem with this. And the dad's name is Ed, and the mother's name is Pam. Les's wife is... There's a lot of characters in this book. Not Les, I'm sorry, it's Len. Len's wife is Martine. Joy, as I said, does not have a good relationship with her mother, so she hits it off immediately with Pam. Pam is very warm and accepting and just provides her that maternalness that she never really got from her own mother. Before they had joined this group, Harker had become engaged to some girl from Idaho. Mina is just devastated because she feels like he is her one. They're like, well, let's pray about this. If you feel this strongly, just pray about it. Not too long after, Harker is no longer engaged to this girl, and before you know it, he and Mina are engaged. And Joy is overjoyed for this. She is loving this for her friend because this is something her friend really felt strongly about. We move along. There are kind of 2 factions of this burgeoning religious group. It's no longer just a Bible study. There's the Idaho group, and then there's the Los Angeles group. Harker and Mina get married. Camille, who had been involved-ish, starts to pull away because, like I'd said, while Joy questions things, she always then accepts it. Whereas Camille is like, this doesn't feel right. And what it comes down to in the end is Camille had a stable home life. So she was not seeking love and affirmation and a place to belong. So she was able to see through the strange verbiage and the strange outlook that this, as they come to be known, the family has on things. They would say, oh, that's my bio family, but this is my family. And she's like, I don't understand why there has to be a distinction and why it seems like bio family has to take a back seat to this family. As Joy continues down the rabbit hole, she is confronted by her feelings for Blue Eyes, whom she is still kept in touch with. She is working through what it means to have basically an idol, something that takes its place in front of God in her life or in her heart. And she said, well, maybe what I have to do is I have to face this head on. So she calls Blue Eyes and she confronts him about where they stand. Because they'd had a couple little romantic moments. Are they friends? Are they more than friends? And she goes, I love you and I want to marry you. And I've always known we are going to get married, but I need to know where you stand. And he's like, well, I can't give you any of that. I can't promise any of that because he was still in school. She then cuts ties with Blue Eyes. This sinks her into a really deep depression. So she is encouraged to go to Idaho and to the big house, which is lovingly referred to as the God Spa, because it seems that anybody who goes to the God Spa or who goes to the big house just comes back refreshed, reinvigorated, everything that they need. So she goes and she does not tell her family. And she does eventually cut off all ties with her family, but at this point, well, I think she's kind of cut ties with her dad because he has questioned the ideology of this religious group she is part of. And because of everything they put in her head, she's just like, oh, he's trying to distract me from all the truths that my family is telling me. But even though she doesn't have a good relationship with her mom, she does keep in some sort of touch with her mom. She goes to Idaho and she has a little bit of a cold. She gets there and there are a couple people, adults, let's put it that way. And the adults over time then designate themselves as the Hamawatsa, which is a Hebrew term for leadership. And that includes Pam and Ed, Len and Martine, and then this guy named Kurt and his wife Lucy. They have a son named Brandon. Her first impression of Kurt is not a positive one. He creeps her out. Because she's not feeling well, somebody says, oh, we've got some medicine for that. Why don't you take this medicine and then just go rest? She's out for like 2 days. And so her mom is trying to call her because she just up and left. She hasn't told anybody where she is. She obviously has not been responding for a couple days. And she's just like, Mom, leave it alone. I'm fine. Like, you don't need to keep tabs on me. And her mom's just saying, I'm worried about you when I don't know where you are and I can't reach you. This is a lovely, large home, but it's going to seed. Probably because Len has the barbarian sons, and for some reason, there's just something about cults that they don't take care of their things. But the one thing is they have rules, and one of their rules is that these girls can only use the shower in the basement, which is where Kurt and Lucy live. I kind of wish we got more on that. Like, this whole big house, there's a lot more to it that I think we could have dove into and we didn't. But we're already thinking there's something nefarious happening here because none of the girls feel comfortable with it. And then when the basement is just kind of a creepy place, Joy takes her shower, and then when she's on her way out, she sees this big jar of the red medicine she was given. And I think it's like hydrocodone. It's something. It's some kind of prescription, something or another that may or may not be expired. And when she finally does wake up, somebody asks her what she was given, and when she describes it, Lucy kind of has an odd reaction and looks at Kurt. Again, I thought that could have been explored a little bit more. We sort of get our answer later, but I felt like in that moment I needed more, or at least I needed more sooner, because this is in the first third of the book, and then what we get later is in like the last eighth of the book. Neither here nor there. That's just something that's important to mention. It's the God Spa. She has the best time. She feels reinvigorated, refreshed. She opts to spend Christmas at the big house, which in the interim, when Harker and Nina get married, very few people are actually invited to this wedding, including certain family members. But so Joy thinks it's a little strange that some of them don't get invites to this wedding. And so now we're at Christmas, and it seems like, again, people are getting left out. Family members who have known Harker's family for ages, their kid is there, but they're not invited. And Len's excuse is, we just want to keep it in the family. We want to keep it small and intimate. Well, Joy has the best Christmas with them because they do very thoughtful gifts. And she's like, this is what I always wanted from Christmas. So she's just digging her hole deeper and deeper. Naturally, the family is kind of starting to close ranks. They're just becoming a bit more exclusive in terms of who they're bringing in, who they're keeping out. And Joy was trying to be selective in her roles because she wanted to honor God. She wanted to abide by the teachings that she was receiving. So when she first got the project for One Tree Hill, and let me sidebar here and say, this was what I was waiting for. I wanted to know what it was like on One Tree Hill because I had received mixed messages only because of my own bare bones research. Because I knew she'd been married, I knew it was unhealthy, but for some reason I was thinking she actually hadn't been married that long on the show. But then doing the timeline of her pregnancy, I was like, well, she had to have been married at least in the later seasons because that's when she had her child. It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to know how this affected her on this show, because I did start listening to the One Tree Hill podcast with her, Sophia Bush, and Hillary Burton, and they are all trauma bonded by some of the executives of this show. I didn't listen very long because it was less about the show and more about their political stances. That's not why I listen to these podcasts. I listen to them because I want that behind the scenes action, There's a lot that I missed out on because I didn't care to continue to listen to this podcast. But my thoughts were these girls had this wonderful bond because they specifically had endured some horrific things at the hands of others. Well, it turns out that because of her affiliation with this group, she did not have close relationships to the rest of the cast. She did have some sort of bond with Paul Johansson, and I believe maybe Craig Sheffer. So her affiliation with this group limited her interactions with the others because they were going to be bad examples. Let me backtrack. Initially, she was like, I don't want to do that project. And then later, her agent came back to her and she was like, they really want you. And because she hadn't really been getting roles, and she also was in the mindset of film. Back in the day, it was either film or television. You could not cross-contaminate because there was a stigma with coming from TV. She's like, well, right now I don't really have a choice. And when she starts making money, Len and Kurt come and visit her. Now, like, you know what? We feel led to open up like a hotel and conference center. And we would love for you to invest. So she invests like 10 grand. Turns out it's some crappy rundown motel. Long story short, it does not do well. From there, they're like, oh, hey, we're gonna buy this restaurant because Len is obsessed with The Sopranos and he loves this idea of having a Cheers type of environment where he can go and he can know everybody's name and he can be in the hubbub and all that kind of stuff. And she's just like, but what about the money I invested in the motel? So they're like, oh, we're just gonna roll it over, blah, 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 but we'll get there. Maybe it is Les. Les feels right, not Len. I think I just wrote it wrong when I first wrote down the names. There is a bit of a concern, a bit of a wondering gossip as to Joy's involvement in this group and what kind of group this really is. And of course, anybody who tries to talk to her about it, she's just like, But she does start to get a little paranoid. And she feels like people are talking about her behind her back. This also does come into play to affect her professionally. One, because if you've watched One Tree Hill, you know that her character had like this music arc. So that actually sent Joy on tour with Tyler Hilton. She had a recording contract that eventually fell through because she was a liability because of her associations with this cult. Then there's also an opportunity where she create this musical. Things fall through because, again, she's a liability. And finally, she actually does get offered a part in Beauty and the Beast, which she, in retrospect, suspects that Les was just trying to control her and keep her from getting too far away because she was kind of their cash cow. And if she was in New York, they would not have the same control over her and all the opportunities that could present. So she then also rejects, or she turns that down as well. At some point, Joy, she'd had a couple romances here and there, but she's sad that everybody's coupling up and she doesn't want to be single forever. She wants to get married. She never gave Quiet Boy a second thought. She thought it was weird. He had anger issues, but kind of coming back after One Tree Hill, she would notice that he'd kind of grown into himself. He was actually kind of sweet. And so she comes to Les and she says, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And she expresses her concerns about not being married. And then she divulges her slight crush on Quiet Boy. Next thing you know, Quiet Boy's asking her out on a date or on dates. Then he and Les visit her in Wilmington, which is where they're filming One Tree Hill, and Les goes out for something and she and Quiet Boy are fooling around. Les walks in, and the next thing you know, QB is proposing. She does not want to marry QB. She acknowledges she doesn't want to marry QB, but she doesn't feel like she can say no. So she says yes. But for me, because of the way that things go after they get married, I just was a little confused as to their compatibility and their chemistry before she got married, because she was like, she knew he wasn't right for her. So I mean, unless it's like hormones and whatnot going on, like, why are they fooling around? Because the thing is, after they get married, he was raised to believe that women should be submissive, that men are in charge. And he was also raised to have this idealistic idea of sex. And they weren't really sexually compatible. And I think it's because they lacked an emotional connection. She really wasn't into it. And it didn't seem like he was either, but he kind of was like, well, we're doing it anyways because it's supposed to be good and we're supposed to do it. And like, that's what I want. So she does make some efforts to kind of spark things, which he doesn't really respond to. Eventually, because they're married, he moves down to Wilmington and he becomes super controlling. What she can wear, what she can spend her money on, how she can furnish her house. She, which I can only imagine was going through her head, like where she was emotionally at this point in her life. She's, in my words, stupidly gives them free reign of her finances. She moves her finances away from legit financial people from like one of the best financial firms there is to the Triad Group, which is what Les had formed. I mean, Les has no head for money, which is why the motel or the hotel convention center went down in flames and why the restaurant never worked out and all this kinds of other stuff. And I'm just like, I cannot fathom. Because I don't know, I guess she does trust them. But in the tone of the novel, and obviously looking back at it with 2020 vision, she realizes the stupidity of her actions. And so there is a tone there of, I shouldn't have, but I did. It's hard to separate the two because obviously she's looking back on something rather than reflecting in the moment. But we all know. And this is when I start getting so mad and so worried and so frustrated because I'm like, we all know where this is headed. We all know they're going to rob her blind. She has this kind of sexual push and pull with her husband, and things are getting so bad that he moves back to Idaho. Although it's not explicitly said that that's why he moves. But looking back, she's like, I'm pretty sure this was all in his control. He's the one, after he caught us fooling around, he's the one who said, you need to propose. And he's the one who was like, maybe absence makes the heart grow fonder. So why don't you move back to Idaho while she is in Wilmington. She actually, before they got married, had bought this beautiful home in Idaho, so he's living there. So within this restaurant, it's very cult-like in the way that he structures it, where the only people who work there are family members, which is Gretchen runs the front of house, and it turns out that she actually embezzles money from them, which frustrated me to no end because Joy never gets any of this money back. And the whole family, upon the revelation, is just like, that's fine. Whatever. Les is constantly coming to her saying, oh, we need money for this and we need money for that. And to me, I'm like, this is a money pit. But she's just like, sure. Which I think is interesting that he even asks her, considering they have access. Like, QB is on her credit card. He's on her bank account. So he can do whatever he wants. And then Triad, who's in charge of her financially, also has access to her money. So I think it's interesting that they actually asked her permission, because you know that they're already spending stuff on stuff that she has no clue about. In this general time frame is when she gets pregnant. It's not, I mean, the pregnancy thing was fine, but the birth and the feeding and things like that were very difficult for her and very unenjoyable for her. Also, there's a bit of dissent from the younger members of the group. Parker and Mina send out a group email basically calling out this group and calling out the things that they are being very hypocritical about. So he and Mina pull away. And then Abe and his wife, Emily, are the only ones who are like, I think they got a point. So they eventually pull away as well. So the group is kind of falling apart, whereas Les is also starting to really close in ranks. Tension really mounts. It comes to a head at a family baseball game where Brandon and Kurt, something happens and Kurt loses his ever-loving mind. Abe tries to step in and Kurt absolutely wallops him. Les tries to step in and restrain Abe, and Joy notices him kind of lovingly holding on to Abe and caressing him and whispering something in his ear, which I wish we got more on that, because this is the first time we've ever seen any kind of same-sex leanings, which I don't know if that's what it's supposed to insinuate. From here is when we have that opening scene with her leaving QB at the hotel, and she has come to the decision that she has to file for divorce. Well, this is super complicated. This is when she finds out that they have basically bled her dry. They have stolen millions from her. On top of the divorce, she also will have a child custody battle. And according to her bank account, she doesn't have enough money for that, which is where I was like, where did your money come from to pay for this? The one thing she did not end up following through with, which just devastates me, is the fraud where they stole all that money from her. But counsel was like, it will take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through all of this. But in her journey to divorce and get custody is when she learns the truth about Les. All these credentials he'd come in with were fabricated. He actually had kind of led a cult-like scenario before, which is the flock he lost. And in that were a lot of complaints of sexual misconduct. This also is where we get some connection to Kurt in that very beginning with the cough medicine, where he and Lucy had taken in a foster child. He had done something very similar, and he gave her some medication that absolutely knocked her out. She wakes up in a cabin in a bathroom, and he's standing over her. I think the underlying message here is he was assaulting her. He may or may not have been clothed in this bathtub, but there's nothing that is actually given to us that says that is the correct interpretation, which she is traumatized. But yeah, so Joy gets all of, she just is seeking out anybody she can who will give her stories or who will be willing to testify against Les, because obviously he shows up to court and he's meek and he's mild and he's loving, and like, how could he ever have displayed this kind of behavior? And this is where I felt so bad for Joy and the other young people, all these other people who'd been hurt by Les. And it aggravated me to no end that people can get away with this and make it so hard, because cults are hard to prove, especially one that wasn't like Jim Jones. It's hard to prove those kinds of environments. It's hard to prove the emotional and mental deception. She does end up getting her divorce. She does end up winning custody of her daughter. She goes through a lot of emotional turmoil because she's like, God, I did everything I thought I was supposed to do. Where were you in all of this? So she doubts her faith. She does have a moment where he speaks to her and he's like, do not doubt me. I thought that was really interesting to look at, because that's the grit that we need. For her just to kind of gloss over that, I felt wouldn't have done the story justice, because the whole reason she got into this group was her faith. So like, where is she with her faith in this moment? With the absence of all of these younger members of the family kind of disintegrates. They lose the hotel, which is sold to the local fire department to use for practice. Les is like, I'll just sell hot dogs to the firemen and, like, have a good old time. They also have to sell the big house, which they end up selling to a girl named Danielle, who I didn't quite understand her role, because Joy initially says, so Danielle was a One Tree Hill fan. The family brought her in dangling Joy because they wouldn't really give Danielle the access she wanted, but there's always the potential access. And so Joy comments on how bringing her in will be their ultimate undoing. I didn't see that so much. She definitely helped. She helped Joy when Joy is trying to get her freedom. But I was like, how was she their ruin? That didn't jive for me so much. So she had helped at the hotel. She had helped at the restaurant. She had noticed discrepancies, like financial discrepancies. It seems that Les and Kurt were taking money under the table. They weren't charging for things so that they could overcharge, get paid in cash, and then split the difference. She buys the big house. She flips the big house. She makes major bucks on the big house. Joy, this is something I would have liked because I was so concerned for her financially. Obviously, we've seen her in roles, so she is getting acting work, and she does kind of just insinuate that her life has gone on, and I guess things are fine. But I would have liked a little bit more on what it looked like to climb out of the hole, because she never got her money back. But she does repair her relationships with her parents, and being part of this group has shown her the truths about what her parents' intentions were versus what they looked like because of the voices in her ear. It seems like her purpose now is education, is to get people to understand what these situations look like and how they come to pass. If you are a One Tree Hill fan, I think this could be the book for you.